Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today's video, we're talking about some biggest potential busts at every position in fantasy football this season. In our last video, we dropped some of the players with the biggest chance to break out. So if you haven't checked that out, be sure to do so. And as well, if you haven't, go check out Peace Collective. This gear I got from them. We got awesome vintage sports apparel. So if you're looking for any of your favorite teams, the NFL, the NBA, NHL, and even, of course, Major League Baseball. They got crew necks, hoodies, t-shirts. Use promo code OwnersBox10. You're going to get 10% off your order. I'll include that link in the description and then as well in the pinned comment. But first, before we get to my players, like I said, a guy at every position. I'm going to answer some of the questions you guys had in the comments. Like I said, we do. So if you have any questions on these players or anything in fantasy football in general, happy to answer them. Want to be as interactive with you guys as I can heading into this season. One we had from our video, and we talked about some of the breakout players. I mentioned Samaje Perine as one of those players that could far exceed his current draft position. So question was about Sean Payton having Alvin Kamara. He said, Sean Payton had Alvin Kamara. Why are we giving him credit for high running back fantasy stats? Definitely a fair question. Obviously, Kamara was a very productive player and a very productive receiver in that Saints offense. But I think there's a lot of times talent plays a factor when it comes to production in fantasy. But as well, when you look at the specific situation here heading into Denver with Peyton is looking at coaches and their schemes and philosophy and how that suits players. You look at a player like Evan Ingram last year. He stepped into the Jacksonville offense coached by Doug Peterson, who had that past history of success with tight ends with Zach Ertz, and that production came and showed its way throughout the season. There's plenty of other examples in this as well. We saw Daniel Jones be a really productive rusher and productive passer with Brian Dable and finally getting a great play caller as well. So there's definitely a lot of factors that play into the player success. But even with New Orleans and for Sean Payton, when I was sharing that stretch, there were guys like Mark Ingram, Pierre Thomas, a ton of players you wouldn't even know about that had high receiving numbers. I would expect that to continue for a Sean Payton coach team heading into this year. Now, the second one, the last one we'll answer here, is from our top 10 defenses video. That was a lot of fun to do. This guy was actually asking about the Falcons. He said, I think you guys are really underrating the Falcons' improvements over this offseason. They were average last season with really subpar players, and now they bring over a Saints staff with a great defensive scheme and got tons of talented pieces. He said, y'all will see. I had a video on our YouTube Shorts that how I was so bothered by the addition of Bijan Robinson with that premium pick as opposed to going to the defensive side. I know the Falcons made a lot of additions in free agency. I don't really think in the long term they're impactful. There's a lot of these guys that are getting to like veterans in the NFL, have been in the league for a while, like Calais Campbell's in his mid-30s. I don't know where you're going to get or how much production you're going to get from him this year. And then as well, like he's not really a future piece for this team. I have a problem with obviously their pass rush, which is the worst in the league. I just don't know how much better it gets. Jeff Okudah, I have a major problem with people that tell me that Jeff Okudah is such this impactful player that they're getting from Detroit. Well, there's a reason why Detroit basically gave him away. They don't think he's very talented or he can live up to that first round pick. So I do think the Falcons got better. We'll see how much better, but definitely not one in my top 10. I definitely don't want to be rude to anyone commenting on the videos. I appreciate everybody commenting, but that one was one I felt like we had to talk about. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. But anyways, let's get to our players here. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe, drop a like, and as well, like I mentioned, drop any comments or questions you have. Let's start at the running back position. And I'm going with Jahmyr Gibbs, the rookie here, the Detroit Lions. He's currently going as the running back 15, as you guys can see. You can check out the offense here, obviously competing with David Montgomery heading into the season. He's going in the end of the third round, early fourth round right now. And the first thing everyone's going to go to, of course, very much deserving of this in terms of the conversation around Jahmyr Gibbs' fantasy outlook, is the draft capital, being an early first-round pick. We look at some of these guys that have gone in the first round at the running back position. Najee Harris finishing as the RB4. Travis Etienne had the injury heading into the season. He comes back, finishes as the RB16. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, not so good, finished as the RB22 after being drafted in the first round in 2020. Josh Jacobs, the RB18 in his first season. Saquon Barkley, that big RB2 season as a rookie. Sony Michel was a first-round pick for the Pats, RB28. And then 2017 had good production from both Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey as rookies. So definitely a fair argument. And then as well, I don't want to completely take this from the perspective of all the negative I can say about Jahmyr Gibbs. The receiving profile is definitely there. He's an excellent receiver, excellent pass catcher. He worked in this Alabama offense last year after transferring from Georgia Tech, where they really lacked talented pass catchers. That's a problem for Alabama heading into their upcoming season too. This is not a college football show as much as I enjoy it, but he had 35 receptions in 2021 and then 44 at Bama in 2022. So great pass catcher. I expect him to be involved there. Detroit outside the top 10 in terms of running back target rate last season, 11th, still good, still solid, and still one that I think Gibbs could be productive in and be better probably than DeAndre Swift potentially. Here's the problem I have. Touchdown profile. That is where the Detroit Lions running back made their money last season. Jamal Williams, just a touchdown machine for Detroit. And Gibbs does not have that. I was really shocked to see these numbers at the college level that I think are definitely going to be an indicator of what to expect at the NFL level. He's like a 5'8" back, under 200 pounds, really not a bruiser at the position. He had just a 21% share of inside the 5 carries for Bama last year. And then I even went to Georgia Tech, who when he was there, they were one of the worst teams in the ACC. They finished 3-9 on the season. He didn't even lead their team in inside the 5 carries in 2021. So is he going to be able to score? This is an offense that operated at a really high level last year. It would be great if he had the profile to be able to score for this team if they continue to be that successful offensively. I don't think that's going to happen though. And if you're going to get a top 15 running back, I need one of two things: double-digit touchdowns or 270 plus touches. The only guy that didn't do that to finish in the top 15 over the last 3 seasons was Mike Davis. And in that season, it was a really bad one for running backs. It was like Kamara, Henry, and Cook were unbelievably good, and then there was an 80-point drop-off to the RB4. So that was a bit of an outlier year. So I definitely think that the problem here is I don't know if I can get either one of those. Like, this is going to be a split backfield, I think. The touchdowns I just mentioned, I don't think are going to come. And then, with you look at as well as profile in college, he only reached double-digit touchdowns once in his 3 years, and it was at Alabama, and he only had 10. Like, there are guys putting 20 plus up in college football. He wasn't able to do that. And then the other thing that really has me leaning towards Montgomery having that touchdown role, and the reason why they acquired him and signed him out of being in Chicago last season, you look at some of these numbers when it comes to being a guy that profiles well to score touchdowns. David Montgomery was top 10 in broken tackles per carry, top 10 in stuff rate, and top 10 in hit at the line percentage. Playing behind a poor offensive line in Chicago, he managed to be top 10 in all of those categories. This is a guy that can score and convert those opportunities at the goal line and inside the 5, and I think he'll get those opportunities. Can Gibbs, sneak his way into some of those opportunities, injuries potentially with Montgomery like we've seen? Definitely. But I think the ceiling isn't quite as high as people think. So I'm not as big on Gibbs as some might be heading into this year. And I do think his RB15 current ADP is probably going to increase with that hype of being that early first-round pick. Next up is Calvin Ridley at the wide receiver spot. Definitely someone that I think a lot of people are very excited for, missing all of last season with the suspension. There's going to be a lot of players I think we're going to find out about gambling on the NFL that are going to run into some problems over the next few years. Ridley was that poster child first guy. He's going right now as the wide receiver 20. I do think this preseason hype will start to build going in the 5th round. But I'm not even sure he's the wide receiver 1 in this offense, and let me tell you why. We obviously have Christian Kirk, who led the team in targets last season and yards. Then we have Evan Ingram on that breakout season, like I mentioned. And these guys are both slot targets, which I think is really important to keep an eye on. Since Lawrence has entered the league, the slot has been a really reliable place for him, and he has not been great in targeting wide receivers or any pass catcher outside the hashes. He had just a 40% completion percentage on targets outside the hashes last season and really lived in the middle of the field, and we saw that both last season with those two guys I mentioned, and then as well the year prior, even with Meyer as the head coach, was Dan Arnold and Laviska Shenault. Those two guys running the slot. Arnold, if he played a full season, would have probably been a top 12 tight end, despite the Jaguars' lack of efficiency offensively back in 2021. So Ridley is a guy that has never really run many slot routes out of the slot, either in college or in the NFL. Currently, on his career average, 84% of his routes come out wide in his career. So definitely not one to look to play in the slot. Maybe they do. Kirk has been so good since the year prior when he transitioned in Arizona to that slot role. Really successful. I don't see that changing. Then I look at Lawrence as a deep passer. I think this can improve. He's still very young, obviously. He was 23rd in adjusted completion percentage on passes of 20-plus yards. Can we get those explosive plays? He was 29th in actual completion percentage of 20-plus yard passes at just 33%. This is, again, a Doug Peterson coach team, and Peterson has shown us in the past that tight end position can be really, really valuable to fantasy owners. But I'm just not so sure on Ridley, especially a full year removed from the league. He isn't very young either. If you've known from previous years of playing fantasy football, this is a guy that came out of college at a really high age. I believe he's almost like 28 now, I believe. So I'm not completely sold on him. I still think there's a good profile. He's still a talented player. I'm not really heavy on this kind of take here, but I do think there are some question marks when it comes to the potential of being a bust at this position with his ADP right now. Moving over to the tight end spot, probably one that's not surprising for a lot of you guys, Kyle Pitts going as the tight end 5, man. The tight end 5, I'm shocked to see that. He's going in the 5th round at the moment in ADP. There's no prior history here that tells me that he can meet this ADP. He was the tight end 33 in 2022. He was that tight end 19 in fantasy points per game if you want to get picky as well. And then the year prior finished as the tight end 10. The Falcons are a team that are running the ball at one of the highest rates in football. Honestly, I think it's one of the highest rates in the NFL of the last 5 seasons, 55%, 55.3%, which was second just behind the Chicago Bears, who are at 56%. And then the next team in third was at 50%. So this is an outlier level of rushing volume from this team. And why would we expect that to change when we get Bijan Robinson added to the mix to this running back room that still carries the same 2 guys in Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson from last season. So we're just getting more talented and more options at this position to be able to run the ball. And we've seen Arthur Smith as an offensive coordinator before arriving in Atlanta in Tennessee, where you're not going to be able to support multiple pass catchers in this offense. And we saw a great season from Drake London. I definitely would be more trusting of him and his profile and his ability in this offense to be able to return his fantasy projection right now. Where for Pitts, I think he's still a talented player, but he's still got to prove it to me if I'm going to be drafting him to be the tight end 5. I could more realistically see a season where he finishes outside of the top 12 than in the top 5, in my opinion. He was 6th in yards per route run at the position, which is good. 2nd in ADOT, so definitely a guy that can create some explosive plays potentially and is downfield for these passes. But we have Desmond Ridder at quarterback. One I don't really trust. I have questions when it comes to accuracy. I have questions when it comes to his anticipation as a passer. And very few of his passes in that limited sample size we got from him were downfield. 8.7% of his passes were of 20-plus yards, which is one of the lowest at the position. I think it was bottom 5 of 45 qualified quarterbacks who I think had maybe 100 or more dropbacks, I think it was. So completion percentage is just 20% too on those deep passes. And then we have I don't trust the volume, and then he hasn't proven to be able to score. He has 3 touchdowns in 2 seasons in the league. So Kyle Pitts is someone I can very easily see being a massive bust when you consider this draft capital. Closing things out here, we go to the quarterback position. I'm going Patrick Mahomes. Might be a little bit shocking for people to see him. He's the QB1 right now in ADP. He's going in the middle of the 2nd round, very early. So this is less about Mahomes as a player and more about the position. So let's get a little bit deeper into why I think that. He is currently, like I said, the QB1 in ADP, and the QB1 in ADP has not finished as the QB1 overall in now 10 straight seasons. That's the last 10 seasons I looked at. I wasn't able to get information past 2013, so this could be longer and is probably longer. I like to do this in my sports betting of fading the public, and this is obviously public perception being that Mahomes coming off a massive season can replicate that again this season. Usually when it comes to betting, everyone thinks the team's going to win or cover the spread. A lot of the time that doesn't happen. Vegas always wins kind of deal. So I'm not afraid to do that at the quarterback position. We're seeing quarterbacks going so earlier than ever this year. Mahomes is going, like I said, middle of the 2nd round. And last year, we saw the upper echelon really separate. When I look at these numbers, Mahomes was the QB1. He had 416 fantasy points. Burrow was the QB4. He had 350. So a bit of a decent separation between the 1 and the 4. But the real drop-off came with Geno Smith, who was the QB5. He had 303. That was at 113-point separation between the QB1 and the QB5. Now, is this an indication of what's to come and the future of this position in fantasy football? Or is this an outlier? And to me, I lean more to the side of this being an outlier because I think there are still about 8 quarterbacks in the league right now that could realistically be the QB1 overall. That would be, of course, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, and then I also include Deshaun Watson in this list when you look at his past pedigree as well. So I think we could see that gap bridged this season, And then you take the positional value where, hey, if I draft a quarterback this early and miss out on, let's say, Mahomes' ADP right now in the second round of a Bijan Robinson, of a Tony Pollard, of a Jalen Waddle, and I don't hit on Mahomes as the number one QB, I'm going to pay a price as opposed to going to a Justin Herbert in the fourth round when the available options are guys with a bit more of question marks when it comes to DeAndre Swift or a J.K. Dobbins or the injury concerns with Keenan Allen. So that's where I see that bust potential really coming in. It's not going to be Mahomes finishes outside the top. I think his worst finish is QB7. Like he's going to be a QB1 undoubtedly as long as he doesn't miss the majority of the season. But I'm really buying high on him in his production. He led the league in passing yards last year, the highest of his career as well at over 5,200 yards. And now the supporting cast, in my opinion, takes a step back. Now, I wasn't very high on Juju Smith-Schuster heading into the year, but now we're looking at Sky Moore, an oft-injured Kadarius Toney to lean on. Can we get him into that, assuredly QB1 type of player when he also isn't a guy that is rushing the ball very well? He's never going to get into that upper echelon of rushing quarterbacks into that 500-yard mark. He's probably going to give you anywhere from 300 to 400. So these are my concerns with Patrick Mahomes. Do I think he can be an outright complete bust when it comes to, at the end of the season, looking at his fantasy finish? No. But when you look at the positional value and you look at the other options a little bit later, a few rounds later, and what you're sacrificing to take him, he could be the reason you lose a fantasy league if he doesn't finish at least top 2 at the position. So I am a little bit concerned about taking Mahomes in where his ADP is at. All right, those are my potential busts at every position heading into the 2023 season. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to like. And if you did enjoy the video, let me know why in the comment section. I'm sure there's some guys you aren't as much out on as I am heading into this season. And as well, if you guys haven't checked out Peace Collective, if you guys want to get any vintage sports apparel for any of your favorite teams, go to the link in the description or in the pinned comments and use OwnersBox 10 as your promo code for 10% off. Love all the gear they have over there. Definitely getting some for the Chargers heading into the year. And of course, thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.